All right, guys, like I said, most of the things we are going to talk about now are just repetitive of what we've done before. Scope includes, I think we've talked about this before. I'm not going to waste time, right? Quality, right? Scope will help you, will detail out the quality of the expected project, right? We tell you the materials or whatever and what needs to be put in place and the standard. They set out the standard, the legal constraints as well, then the technology, the resources that are needed, the skill requirement, the knowledge and experience, the supply and profit, right? Then we talk even about the inclusion and exclusion. Remember, inclusion came out in your exam, right? Yeah, so the concept of exclusion in a project environment, it includes any project that, and something that you are not going to include in the project, right? So, like we have it here, we say any project cannot be everything to everyone. So there are certain things that are not going to be included in the project. That is what we mean by exclusion. Inclusions are the list of things that will be included, everything that will be included in the project. Then deliverables, you know what are deliverables, right? The outcomes of the project, and it depends on the specific project, right? Okay. For example, if we have a project of a training center project, some of the deliverables could include one of the office for the administration, what needs to be delivered, right? So, yeah. Then document objectives. We are talking in terms of the objectives of the project. As we have it, we say the project manager document the identified project objectives, assumptions, right? You know what assumptions are, right? What you think is going to happen, or perhaps it might not happen, right? Then needs, expectations, constraints, a kind of barriers, difficulties, right? In the project environment, exclusion are good. So documentation done in form of a report. When you know how to structure a report. For example, it must have the title, it must have the introduction, perhaps the overview. Then the report distributed to the stakeholder. For example, if you want to make a report to the stakeholders, it must be formally structured, right? And it could be for discussions, yeah, discussions with the stakeholders as well, right? Just not just to distribute. So the layout of a general report is uh, stand like this. It looks like this. It must have the title page, right? Then the title and the date of the report done in capital letter. The title of the report, right, and the date. Then you quote also the compiler of the report, who is compiling the report. If it is the project manager, it needs to be reported there, right? Then whosoever that is compiling it needs to be reflected, so that in due course one can know who compiled. In case of anything that one needs to, for audit purpose, let me put it that way, if you will, then one can easily know, identify the person that compiled the report, right? Because that one is very important as well. Then the executive summary, right, of the report. We state the key issue covered in the report, right? Then the purpose of the report as well, the findings and the recommendations. Findings means the evidence, right? Then the recommendations as well needs to be executed, needs to be included, I mean, sorry to say, in the executive summary. Then written after finalizing the report, right, which is the findings and recommendation. Then it should be on one page long. Executive summary should not be too long, right? It could be one page or half a page, right? It depends on how lengthy the report is. Then you have the introduction. We are still talking about the layout of a general report. I have never seen the exam where they ask you to write it out, right? But for knowledge sake, we need to know how to formulate a report. Then it must have introduction in terms of the overall idea of the report needs to be included, right? Then the purpose of the report needs to be incorporated in the introduction aspect of it. Because once somebody read the introduction, you should be able to know what the report is all about. Then the objective of the report, of course, this will be incorporated. Then an outline of the report. That after the report, you have the problem statement, the problem or issue that the report focuses on must be uh, reported clearly in a very articulated manner, if you like. Then one or two paragraphs explaining why it is important to focus on the issue. We talk about the issue clearly stated, and you must add one or two paragraphs explaining why attention should be given to the mentioned problem or the mentioned issue in the problem statement. Then you construct a problem statement in one sentence, if you like. The problem of this, right, or why we are focusing on this issue, then don't need to write a lot. Then the background of the problem or the issue project. You see, this is a kind of how you present a research report, right? Then you must explain how the ideas of the project come about, explain the problem, how the problem arose, right? The investigating, if investigating any problem, no, explain how the problem arose, right? If investigating any problem. So if the report is based on uh, outcome or report, the report is based on the problem that have been investigated, then you must uh, include in the report how the problem in the first case arose, right? You need to explain what happened prior to the project or problem that brought about the need for action, then the process that took place prior that necessitated the project, right? For example, when you look at this kind of layout now, these examples they are given, it's a kind of a report based on a project. Remember, like I said, you initiate a project based on two premises. One, either to take advantage of opportunity or there's a problem. So you need to report here what type of problem that you that is you've seen or you've identified that necessitate, right, the initiation of the project. Then the objective, you need to provide details of the objectives, each under its own heading, right? You could have three, four, five objectives. Sometimes you can have main objectives, right? Which is reflected, main objective is more or less linked to the title. Then you have the sub objectives. Then you have the conclusion, of course, which is based on the project evaluation and investigation. Then on the last one is the appendices, where you put supporting document. That is how the layout is. Okay. Now remember the way this slides or this presentation is structured is based on your textbook, right? In which we are is a kind of conceptualization of various concepts that you can be found in a project environment. Work package, you know what is a work package? By way of conceptualization, work package is a piece of work that can be estimated realistically and can be completed quickly. Right? A work package, in other words, is a deliverable at the lowest level of work breakdown structure. Right? Then develop, how do you develop a WBS, work breakdown structure? Right? What are the things that you consider? Right? Things to consider is time, cost, quality, and quantity. Then how to develop WBS. This one is very important. Sometimes it do comes out in the exam, right? It do come out. Then the first thing you need to do in developing the WBS, we know that we must first of all list each task. What is a WBS? A WBS is a way of it's an outcome or output of a project that has been broken down. You take a project, you identify what needs to be done, right? Then you arrange it in a hierarchical order. For example, headings, subheadings, sub-sub. So that is a WBS up to the extent of a web package. So in doing that, you first of all, to start with, identify the task, right? You identify you each task must be broken down into subtasks and all the relevant details are identified. Right. For example, let's say a project of a house, right? To build a house. Then you first of all identify, as we said, identify each task, right? And the task, by doing so, you first of all start by identifying the main task, the main one. Then below the main one, then you identify the sub until you read the work package. Like, for example, if it is a building, I can say, in identifying the main task, I can say foundation, right? Foundation is a main task. Then after foundation, I can say block work, right? After the block work, I can say roofing. Then I, I can mention ceiling. After ceiling, doors and windows and all those stuff. Those are the main tasks. You still have to break the main task into sub tasks. Well, now when you arrange it in the form of a hierarchy, then it constitutes what we call a WBS. Right. Then you need to identify the resources needed, of course, right? Resources needed to do the project. Then the time frame of the task is noted. The time frame, enough time frame, how long it will take you to execute the respective task needs to be noted. Then the task must be prioritized, right? The way you are drawing a Gantt chart, you need to put most of these things that we mentioned here into consideration, prioritizing it, know what needs to be done first, right? That is a way of prioritizing. Then you identify interdependency between the tasks. In other words, the relationship between the tasks, right? And tasks are prioritized. So project scope, right? Project scope statement. I think we must put project scope statement there. It must have the name of the project, the description of the project, how it will be implemented, special features or issues that needs to be considered, and main activities to be undertaken. So aspects that are included in the project scope, aspects that are excluded in the project scope. Like we said, project scope involves inclusion and exclusion, right? Then the project success factors. What you think you will see in the project or things that needs to be incorporated in the project that can uh, make it a success, or the things that you can see in the project that can give you an indication that the project is will be successful, right? Then the cost of the project, the timeline, the resources as well, the quality. The timeline is the schedule, right? So in any scope of a project, there should be a timeline, right? Then the budget of a project. How do you know the budget? What has been earmarked to execute the project, right? The project estimate. So how do you come about that? Here we got four steps, right? You make a list of all the required resources, then you make a list of all the costs involved. Costing what? Here you need to cost all the resources, right? For example, in executing the project, we got, when we say resources here, resources is generic, it's a composite. There are a lot of things that needs to be taken into consideration here, resources. For example, you have human resource, right? The employees that are going to work on the project. Then you have materials, even the money involved, a lot of stuff. Whatever that is going to be involved in executing the project needs to be costed. Then you allocate cost added to each project activities and develop a project, right? Draw up a resource chart. A resource chart is a kind of a Gantt chart, right? The difference between a Gantt chart and a resource chart is this. Remember a Gantt chart, you got the activities as well as the duration, right? In place of the activities, then you put the resources, right? So if you want to draw the resource chart in relation to the budget, you list out the resources, then on the side that you put the duration for the Gantt chart, then you put the cost so that one can easily visualize it. Say, this resource that you need, this is how much it's going to cost, right? From there, one can easily know how much it's going to cost by adding up the cost of each respective resource. Then this one is a Gantt chart, right? This aspect is very important as well. It do come out in the exam. They will ask you what you need to do, steps that needs to be taken in developing a Gantt chart. When they say timeline, timeline is the same thing as a Gantt chart, right? Or the tool that you can use to uh, monitor the duration of the project is a Gantt chart. Tool for scheduling timeline is a Gantt chart. Then you compile a task list, what needs to be done, right? You work out the interdependencies. Interdependencies mean the relationship, right? We got different types of relationship. We got finish to finish, right? That means the two must finish the same time. If there are two tasks, it could be two or three tasks, depends. So if it goes that relationship of finish to finish, it must all be done the same time. If you have finished to start, that means the preceding task must finish before task B will start. So if you have task A, task B, and the relationship between task A and task B is finished to start. You must finish task A before you start task B. Does it make sense to you? Then you estimate the time involved to complete each task, right? In which case, you must make sure that you take consideration of the specification. You must be clear in terms of specification, the scope, what needs to be done. Then you schedule the task and perhaps you determine the milestones, right? Milestones at a point you indicate in the Gantt chart certain position that you feel or certain point you feel that you can consider as a milestone whereby something great is achieved, right, in the project. Then the standard, right? You know what we mean by standard? The standard as it stands, yeah, in this context is the level of quality or achievement used as a measure in order to make a comparison. You see, when you are starting a project, right, you got standard that needs to be followed. That standard acts as a benchmark, right? Acts as a benchmark against which to compare the final outcome of the project or the product of the project or the deliverables. Do you understand what I mean? For example, here now we said for you to pass this subject, project management, right, the minimum is 50%. So that 50% is a standard, it's a benchmark. So whatever marks you got, we compare it to that. If you get below 50 marks, that means your performance is below standard. You fail. So beyond that, we consider you to have passed the subject. So it's the same thing in project management. There must be standard set, which in other words refers to the level of quality or achievement that can be used to measure the whatever outcomes at the end of the project or whatever outcomes the project will turn out to be. Then types of standard, right? Guys, here is very technical. You need to listen. Types of standard, technical standard. What do we mean by technical standard? This involves the technical or engineering element of a job, right? It involves the technical aspect of the job, right? In which case, it's usually specified what and why of the job. Yeah? What must be done and why must it be done? Right. Then the operative standard is the human element, usually specify who, when, and why. Right. Then steps to create, we've already talked this one. Step to create is Gantt chart. It sounds repetitive now. You list the tasks that have been taken, estimate the time needed, you create a table. Guys, this one is very important, right? In the exam, they always like to ask you. Remember when I was explaining the one for timeline, it's more or less the same, that you need to take note. Then project scope document. Project document usually presented in form of is this thing okay. Scope. Project document usually presented in form of a report. Project management, implementers, location, time frame. This one is a kind of tautology. The guideline for writing a scope document in the form of a report. If you are writing a scope document, a scope, for writing a scope uh, document, which is a scope report, you need to follow this format, right? Title, terms of reference, summary, table of content. This represent the structure, right? Bibliographies. You know what is list of references and bibliographies. This one here you list out the sources of your information, right? This one bibliography is mostly related to books. Here it could be articles and whatever, wherever sources that you got your information from needs to be referenced. Otherwise, it will constitute a kind of what we call plagiarism, right? You don't plagiarize. Then tools used for managing projects. Tools used for managing projects. So, for you to be able to manage your project efficiently, in order to realize the project objective, there are certain tools that you need to utilize, right? For example, budget control chart. This one helps you to control your finances. It helps you to do what we call uh, cost control, right? You got your budget chart in terms of what needs to be done. So when you start executing the project, you must make sure that you look back into your budget, right? As your budget is detailed out in the control chart. So it will help you to know whether you are overspending or underspending, right? It helps you to monitor the expenses for you not to uh, overspend in the project. So if during your budget control you discover that you started already overspending some of the items, you need to control it and see where you can be able to save to contain overspending. Then project timeline, right? You can use a Gantt chart. Of course, the Gantt chart helps you to control the timeliness of your project. It helps you to control project to make sure that you execute your project within the time frame. Because when you look at a Gantt chart, it can test you, it can quickly inform you whether you are running late or rather if you will behind schedule in order for you to inject some element of control, perhaps by uh, increasing the resources for you to be able to finish your project on time. WBS, as we do know, work breakdown structure help you to identify exactly what needs to be done. So it can help you to be able to control or to manage your project in terms of you can use it in this way. You look at what needs to be done in the project, you look at what you have done. So the WBS serve as a benchmark for you to be able to know if there is something missing or not. Then event control chart is another uh, tool that can be used, right? You set out events, certain areas in your project where you can be able to relate back in terms of your achievement of such events that were predetermined during the design stage or the planning stage. The resource chart, resource means the resources that needs to be used, right? It has to be in form of a chart. It helps you to know exactly what resources are required. So you can as well use it as a benchmark to manage your project. For example, you can easily know what is short and what is oversupply, right? Then you can use this. Then preparation control chart and milestone chart, you can use that. Material control, milestones. Remember your milestone is a point in a project where you feel something is achieved. It can help you to control the project in the sense that wherever you set your milestone, and if you are not, your project is not executed up to that stage, you know you are falling behind, right? So you can use that one to determine what is to manage your project. Then the material control chart. Material control chart can be used to control your project, right? You know the type of materials to be used and you got a chart for the various material. So as the project is ongoing or as the project is developing, you can answer in one time of the order or at a certain time in a project to you refer back to your material control chart to see whether there are short supply or oversupply. Then financial document, right? You have, for example, you have your voucher, what they call it, petty cash voucher. You have everything that relate to uh, financials or the financial aspect of the project or financial document can be used, for example, like what we call audit trail, whereby you can be able to trace expenses to its source. Then schedule of activities can help you just like the timeline and project scope document. So this one can help you to be able to manage your project. So these are the tools that can be utilized. Tools are not exhaustive, but in this context, these are the ones that we can talk about now. So we are going to stop here. Tomorrow, by the grace of God, we are going to start on this place, critical success factors of a project. Right? So the period is over now. Okay, let's stop here.